I almost didn't open the door that night because I wasn't expecting anyone and I had just gotten out of the shower, still wrapped in a towel, already annoyed at whoever thought it was a good idea to show up unannounced. But the knocking didn't stop. It wasn't aggressive, just persistent. Like whoever was out there wasn't planning to leave. So I opened it. And for a second, my brain just refused to process what I was looking at. Two kids, my brother's kids, standing on my doorstep with backpacks, a small suitcase, and that kind of quiet you only see in children who already know something is wrong. My niece looked up at me first, trying to smile like she was supposed to, like this was normal, like she wasn't standing outside my apartment at 9 in the evening without her father. Dad said we're staying with you for a bit. I remember blinking at her, waiting for the rest of the sentence, for him to step out from behind the hallway corner, for this to turn into some kind of awkward, but explainable situation. But there was no one else there. Just them. And then my phone buzzed in my hand. A message from my brother. I didn't even open it right away, because something in my chest had already started to tighten, like my body understood before my mind did that whatever I was about to read was not going to be simple. When I finally did, it was short. Way too short for what it was.
I'm sorry.
I didn't have a choice. Just a few days. I'll explain everything later. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for it to somehow change, for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. A few days. Like you drop off a package. Like you don't leave your kids at someone's door without even asking. I called him immediately. It went straight to voicemail. By the third time, I wasn't even listening to the ringing anymore, just staring at the kids standing in my hallway now, because I had already stepped aside and let them in without thinking, like my body made the decision before I could. And that's the part that still gets me. I didn't say yes. He didn't ask. But somehow it was already happening. I had a life, a routine, and plans that I had been building for years with someone who wanted the same things I did. And none of those plans included becoming a mother overnight to two children who weren't mine. But as I stood there, watching my niece carefully take off her shoes like she didn't want to be a problem, and my nephew clutching his backpack like it was the only thing that still belonged to him, I realized something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't going to be just a few days. My boyfriend was sitting on the couch when I walked in with them, his laptop still open on his knees, completely unaware that in the span of 30 seconds, our entire life had just been rearranged, without our permission. He looked up, confused at first, then slowly closed the laptop as his eyes moved from me, to the kids, to the small suitcase I set down by the door. What is this? I wish I had a better answer than the truth, because the truth sounded just as ridiculous out loud as it did in my head. My brother dropped them off. He says it's just for a few days. I could actually see the moment his expression changed, like something clicked into place, and he realized this wasn't a joke, wasn't temporary, wasn't something that would just resolve itself if we waited long enough. He dropped them off and left. I nodded, already feeling defensive even though none of this was my fault. I tried calling him. He's not answering. There was a pause, and in that pause I could already feel where this was going. We're not doing this. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We're not what? We're not raising your brother's kids. Something about the way he said it, calm and final, made something inside me tighten. I didn't agree to this either. Then don't act like you did. That stung more than I expected, because technically he was right, except for one thing he didn't seem to understand. They're already here. I gestured toward the hallway where I could hear my niece whispering to her little brother, trying to keep him calm, trying to make it feel like an adventure instead of abandonment. What do you want me to do? Just put them back outside? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated now. I want you to call someone. Their mom. Social services. Anyone. This is not our responsibility. Our responsibility. I repeated, my voice sharper now. They're his kids, not ours. Exactly. We just stood there for a second, staring at each other, both of us holding on to the same reality, but seeing completely different outcomes. Because for him, this was simple. Boundaries, logic, and a problem that needed to be redirected somewhere else. But for me, it wasn't that clean. They're scared, I said quietly. You didn't see their faces when they got here. And that's terrible, he replied, softer now, but still firm. But you can't fix everything just because you feel bad. I knew that. I did. That was the whole point of the life we built together, wasn't it? Careers first, stability, and freedom. No kids, no chaos, no situations we didn't choose. We had agreed on that from the beginning. And now all of it was sitting in my hallway, unpacking a life neither of them asked for. This is temporary, I said, even though I wasn't sure anymore. Just until I figure out what's going on. He didn't answer right away, and somehow that silence felt worse than anything he could have said. Because it wasn't just disagreement anymore. It was distance. And I could already feel it growing. The first night, I barely slept, because every small sound from the other room kept pulling me out of whatever shallow rest I managed to get, and by morning I already felt like I'd been doing this for weeks instead of hours. I told my boss I had a family situation and would work from home, but that turned into missed calls, half-finished emails, and a constant feeling that I was failing at everything at once. Breakfast turned into negotiation. Getting dressed turned into a meltdown. Trying to answer a single message turned into being interrupted every 2 minutes by something that actually mattered more. And through all of it, my phone stayed silent. There were no calls or messages. There was nothing. By day 2, I stopped expecting him to reply and started trying to figure out what he had gotten himself into. I called everyone I could think of. Old friends, people he used to work with, even someone I hadn't spoken to in years just because I remembered they once mentioned knowing him. At first, nobody knew anything. Or at least, that's what they said. But then the tone started changing. Small pauses before answers. Shorter replies. That subtle shift people make when they know more than they're willing to tell you. And eventually someone slipped. Look, I don't know everything, but he's been in trouble for a while. What kind of trouble? Another pause. Money. A lot of it. My stomach dropped because suddenly everything started making a different kind of sense. The random calls he used to ignore when I was around. The way he'd joke about getting back on his feet like it was nothing. The fact that he never stayed in one place too long. How bad? I asked. The answer didn't come right away, and when it did, it was quiet. Bad enough that people are looking for him. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing until I had to force air back into my lungs. People, not banks and not bills, just people. That night, after I finally got the kids to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen staring at my phone, rereading his message over and over like I had missed something hidden between the lines. I didn't have a choice. At first, it sounded like an excuse. Now it felt like a warning. And for the first time since they showed up at my door, a thought crossed my mind that I didn't want to fully form. What if he didn't leave them here because he needed help? What if he left them here because he was running out of time? By the third day, everything felt off balance, like my life had shifted just enough that nothing fit the way it used to, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't force it back into place. I was behind on work, exhausted in a way that sleep didn't fix, and constantly aware of the fact that this situation wasn't temporary anymore, even if I kept pretending it was. And he felt it too. We barely talked that day, moving around each other like strangers in a space that suddenly didn't belong to both of us anymore. Until that night. The kids were asleep, the apartment finally quiet, and for a second I thought maybe we could just sit down and figure this out like we always did. But the moment I walked into the living room, I knew that wasn't going to happen. He was already standing there, keys in his hand. We need to talk. There was no softness in his voice this time, no patience left to stretch this conversation into something easier. I can't keep doing this. My chest tightened instantly. Doing what? This, he said, gesturing toward the hallway, toward everything that had taken over our lives without permission. Living like this and pretending this is normal. It's not supposed to be normal, I snapped. It's a situation. I'm trying to fix it. And how long is that going to take? I didn't answer because I didn't have one. That's the problem, he continued. There's no plan. There's no end. You're just accepting it. I'm not accepting it, I said, even though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true anymore. They're kids, I added, quieter now. I can't just throw them out. I'm not saying that, he replied, his voice rising for the first time. I'm saying you need to choose. And there it was. It was clear, simple, and brutal. Choose what? Choose whether this is your responsibility or not. Something inside me shifted at that moment, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that I knew whatever I said next was going to change things in a way we wouldn't be able to undo. I didn't choose this, I said slowly. And I didn't choose to be in it, he shot back. Silence filled the room, heavy and final, stretching just long enough for both of us to understand what was coming. If you keep them here, he said, his voice lower now but steady. I'm not staying. It should have been an easy answer. A few days ago, it would have been. We had built everything around the idea that we would never end up in a situation like this, that we would always stay in control of our lives, that nothing and no one would force us into something we didn't want. But nothing about this felt like a choice anymore. They don't have anyone else, I said. He let out a quiet breath, like he already knew. Then, I guess you've made your decision. He didn't wait for me to confirm it. He just walked past me, opened the door, and left. And just like that, my life split into before and after. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, staring at the empty space he left behind, trying to convince myself I had done the right thing. Even though it didn't feel right, it just felt necessary. That's when I noticed it. It was envelope. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, half hidden under a stack of papers I hadn't touched since the kids arrived, like it had been there the whole time, waiting for me to finally slow down enough to see it. My name was written on it, in his handwriting. And suddenly, everything inside me went cold. I didn't want to open it. Because some part of me already knew that whatever was inside was going to make this real in a way I couldn't take back. But I opened it anyway. My hands were shaking before I even unfolded the paper, like my body was trying to stop me from reading something it already knew I wouldn't be able to ignore. The first line hit me harder than anything else could have. If you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. I stopped there for a second, staring at the words, hoping I had misunderstood them, that maybe there was some version of this where he showed up later and explained everything like it was just another one of his mistakes. But the rest of the letter didn't leave room for that. I know you're probably angry. You have every right to be. I didn't ask because I knew you'd say no, and I didn't have time to convince you. My chest tightened. He knew exactly what he was doing. I messed up worse than you think. I owe people money, and it's not the kind you can ignore or fix with time. They've already found me once. I felt my grip tighten around the paper. Found him. Not called and not warned. I tried to fix it. I really did, but I ran out of options. The words blurred for a second, and I had to blink just to keep reading. I couldn't take them with me. It wouldn't be safe. And I couldn't leave them with anyone else. That line stayed with me longer than the others. Not anyone else with me. I know this isn't fair to you. I know it's not your responsibility. But you're the only person I trust not to let them fall apart because of my mistakes. I let out a shaky breath. I didn't realize I was holding. This wasn't panic. This wasn't last minute. He had thought this through. They're good kids. Better than I ever was. Please don't let them pay for what I did. My vision blurred again, but this time I didn't wipe it away. I'm sorry I put this on you. I'm sorry I didn't give you a choice. But I don't have one anymore. And then the last line. With no explanation, no plan, and no, I'll come back. Just take care of them. That was it. No signature needed. I just stood there in the middle of my kitchen, the paper still in my hands, feeling something inside me collapse slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hold on to. Because this wasn't temporary. It never was. He didn't leave them with me because he needed help. He left them with me because he was gone. And for the first time since all of this started, the reality of it finally settled in, heavy and unavoidable. He wasn't coming back. Not in a few days, not ever. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the kitchen floor, the letter still in my hands, staring at nothing while everything inside me felt too loud to process. I wasn't crying at first. I was just empty. Like my brain refused to catch up with what had just happened. Like if I didn't fully understand it, maybe it wouldn't be real yet. But it was every part of it. He didn't ask, and he didn't plan to come back. And somehow, he had decided that my life was the one he could walk into, rearrange, and leave behind without even being there to face it. At some point, I did start crying. Not quietly, not controlled, but the kind that comes out when you realize you've been pushed into something you can't undo, no matter how unfair it is. I don't know how long I sat there like that. Long enough for the silence in the apartment to feel different. It was hard for me. Like it was waiting for me to do something. And for a second, I thought about not doing anything at all. About calling someone. Social services, anyone. Just handing this back to the world and stepping out of it like it was never mine to begin with. I didn't ask for this. I said it out loud, just to hear it, just to remind myself that I had every right to walk away. And maybe that's what scared me the most. Because I could. No one would blame me. No one would say I was wrong. They weren't my kids. They weren't my responsibility. And yet I heard something behind me. Soft footsteps. I turned my head, and my niece was standing there in the hallway, holding onto the wall like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to come closer. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That broke something in me in a way nothing else had. Because she thought this was her fault. Because she had already learned to apologize for things she didn't cause. You don't have to say that, I said, my voice barely holding together. She hesitated, then asked the one question I wasn't ready for. Is he coming back? And I couldn't answer her. Not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud would make it final in a way I wasn't ready to accept. So I just shook my head and she nodded, like she already knew, like she had been expecting it. That's when I noticed the folder in her hands. I found this in Dad's bag, she said, walking closer now, holding it out to me carefully, like it mattered. I took it without thinking, my fingers still unsteady as I opened it. At first, it just looked like paperwork. There were forms, copies, and documents. But then I started actually reading, and everything inside me went cold again. My name, repeated over and over. Emergency contact. Temporary guardian. Authorization forms. Signatures and dates. They were not from yesterday. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was planned. He did it carefully, and on purpose. I flipped through the pages faster now, my heartbeat picking up with every line that confirmed what I was starting to understand. This wasn't something he decided in a moment of panic. He didn't just run out of options. He prepared for this. He chose me, not because I agreed, not because I wanted this, but because he knew I wouldn't walk away. I closed the folder slowly, my hands no longer shaking, but something else taking its place. Something heavier. Something steadier. He didn't leave you here by accident, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. And for the first time since all of this started, the chaos in my head began to settle into something else. It was not clarity. It was not acceptance. But a decision forming underneath everything else. Because if he had planned this, then so could I. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because something had shifted, and I knew that if I closed my eyes, I might wake up trying to pretend this was still temporary. And it wasn't. By morning, the apartment looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. There were small things everywhere that didn't belong to my old life. A glass left on the table. A small jacket hanging by the door. 2 voices in the other room, quiet but present. I stood there for a moment, just watching it, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside of it. I felt like I was already in it. Not by accident and not by force, but because I had stayed. And that meant something. I made breakfast without overthinking it, without treating it like a temporary solution, without telling myself I would figure it out soon. Because soon didn't exist anymore. Only now did. My niece watched me carefully, like she was trying to read something in my face, something that would tell her whether she needed to prepare for another goodbye. You don't have to worry, I said quietly, placing a plate in front of her. And this time I meant it. Not because I had answers, but because I had made a decision. Later that day, I made the calls I had been avoiding, not to give them away, not to fix the situation and step out of it, but to make it official, to take responsibility in a way that no one could undo. The process wasn't simple. Nothing about it was. But for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized something that scared me more than anything else had. I wasn't doing this just because I had to. I was doing it because I wanted to. That part didn't come all at once. It came in small moments. The way my nephew reached for my hand without thinking when we crossed the street. The way my niece stopped apologizing for things that weren't her fault. The way the apartment slowly started to feel less like something I had lost and more like something I was building. I thought about him sometimes, about the life we had planned, the version of the future where none of this existed, where everything was controlled, predictable, exactly the way we wanted it. And I understood why he left. Because this wasn't the life we chose. But that didn't mean it wasn't the one I could choose now. I never wanted kids. I said it out loud once, standing in the kitchen late at night, just to hear how it sounded now. It didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like a rule anymore. It felt like something that belonged to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Because somewhere between the door opening and everything that came after, I changed. Not into someone who had everything figured out. Not into someone who suddenly believed in perfect endings. But into someone who stopped waiting for life to ask for permission. He made his choice. And then so did I. So tell me, would you have taken them in, knowing it could cost you everything you had planned? Or would you have walked away and lived with that instead? The way my nephew reached for my hand without thinking when we crossed the street. The way my niece stopped apologizing for things that weren't her fault. The way the apartment slowly started to feel less like something I had lost and more like something I was building. I thought about him sometimes, about the life we had planned, the version of the future where none of this existed, where everything was controlled, predictable, exactly the way we wanted it. And I understood why he left. Because this wasn't the life we chose. But that didn't mean it wasn't the one I could choose now. I never wanted kids. I said it out loud once, standing in the kit. If stories like this hit you, subscribe.